Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the High Five Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. My name is Rachel, and I'm here with Crystal and Jeremy, and we are so excited to jump into the fourth session of the month of August. So this month, we've been teaching about how God has a plan for each of us. In preschool, we've been teaching Yippee, God has a plan for me. And in kids, they are learning that they are designed for a purpose through their theme, Adventure Awaits. So this week, we are teaching that I can look back. And we're in the book of Genesis in chapters 42 through 50 and learning about Joseph and his brothers. So as we start to think about how we can look back and see how things in the past have worked out, that we can find encouragement in how we look back and things that have happened, I have a question for you, Jeremy and Crystal, about looking back. So what is something you look back on that changed and helped you in a big way?
Ooh, um, I can point to lots of things because I'm kind of an older guy, so I could point to lots of things here that God has used in my life. Um, I will let me use this one. So when I graduated seminary in 2006. um, uh, Oftentimes I refer to this as as like my Jonah story, but in some ways you might kind of look at it. I could look at it through the lens of Joseph as well, because um, everything in my life was pointing to, and I don't have time to talk about every single thing, but everything in my life was pointing me towards continuing my education and working on a doctorate. For whatever reason, in my mind, I had locked in on, no, I need to get out of school and I need to get out in the field of ministry and do the work. Um, and that moment has defined a lot of decisions that I have made over the years,
Mm,
where um, the way I have made decisions, and even how I parent my kids to make decisions as my older kids have gotten into adult years, how I parent them, how I make decisions, really from that moment, um, has been, um, stop trying for me to figure out what God's long-term plan is, but be faithful in the moment, to the opportunities God is giving me. And so I could have done that and been in school and all that, but instead I didn't. And took me through a series of different decisions, um, that God really convicted me over. Like, you don't have to know the whole plan. You don't even have to think
mm,
about what the whole plan is. You just need to be faithful where I've put you and take whatever the step is in front of you, that I'm leading you towards. And so, and I'm way oversimplifying this story for the sake of time, but yeah, I think that was it. In a moment, I made a decision to not do one thing and to pursue something else, and in doing that, it has really framed how I see the world and how I see faithfulness, my faithfulness to God, in following whatever plan He's going to put in front of me. It has become less about me figuring out the plan and more about, God, I'm here. I'm going to be
mm.
faithful here as long as I'm here. If you lead me to something different, I'll take that step and I'll be faithful as long as I can be there. If you bring me to something else after that, I'll be and I'll just take it one step at a time and be faithful. And again, it's even impacted my parenting. How, when my kids have moved into college and the young adult, helping them say, don't feel like you have to figure out the whole plan. Yes, God has a plan for you and He's designed you for a purpose, but don't feel like you have to figure it out yet.
Mm.
Just be faithful where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. Crystal, what about you?
Yeah, I've got, y'all know my story, my testimony. I've had a lot of hard things in the past, but the one that comes to mind right now is I've had to battle Hodgkin lymphoma 3 times total. But the second time was really, really rough. And I went through a stem cell transplant that actually made me go through menopause at the age of 28. And I was devastated. I wanted a million kids like Jeremy has. But at the time, I had 2 biological kids. And I just remember being so just discouraged and disappointed, thinking like, Lord, you put this desire in my heart for a big family, and now here I am, 28, and I can't have any more kids. And I just remember being really, really sad about that. But as a result, I ended up some years later going through the adoption route and adopting my son Noah from North Carolina. And I cannot imagine life without Noah. He is the most incredible, wonderful, amazing kid. He would hate if he was listening to this and heard me call him a kid because he's 13. But just being able to see how God held me in that really like sad, questioning, discouraged, disappointed, angry time, and then was like, I have an amazing plan. And I've always had this plan. My cancer wasn't a surprise to him. What happened in my body wasn't as a surprise to him. It had always been his plan to go this route for Noah to be a part of my family. And so that has helped me now. When those unexpected, disappointed, discouraging things come, I look back and I remember that and I'm like, God is doing something. He's always doing something. And I can know that it's good. I can always know that something good is on the horizon because he's there and he's always good. So
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Crystal. Um, I think it's essential to look back and reflect on what God has done. When we do that, it can help us trust Him more and believe that He will do what He says He will do. And so, as we're thinking about looking back, Jeremy, how does this story, our Bible story this week, show that looking back helps with moving forward?
This is such a great story for this because there are really two camps of looking back here. You've got the camp of the brothers who probably didn't really want to look back all that much and see what all the things that they have done. I think we see in this story a little bit of redemption for them, that they have changed and learned and grow and have grown over the years. But you have them looking back over their life at some point, going, like we can't do this to our father again. Like we've got this problem where um, we've not had a great past, and we're just trying to make ends meet right now. That's where the brothers are. And then on the other side, you got Joseph, who he's confronted with his past and has to look back, and he of course doesn't have a whole lot of great memories of his brothers, because the last time he saw them was being thrown in a pit and being sold to the slave traders. And so these two different groups are looking back, and ultimately we don't really know what's happening in the lives of the brothers all that much. We know, we kind of see a little more detail into what's happening in Joseph, but we see both of these looking back, and ultimately both coming to the conclusion that God is working and has been working in our lives. And we see that most potently, most directly in some of Joseph's final words in the book of Genesis, where this is that famous verse that we all know, that says, don't be sad about what you did. You didn't send me here, but God did. God made me ruler over the land. What you planned for evil, God
mm-hmm.
planned for good.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we again, we don't see all of we don't see all of what's happening in the minds of the brothers, other than the fact that they do show some signs of redemption, and in not wanting to, hey, we're just guys who care about our family, and we want to provide for our family, and take care of our family, not what they did with Joseph. But when we see Joseph and him getting to that point of, yeah, like, look, guys, we look back on our lives and our history together, it's not been great, and we
Mm,
can admit that. We can admit that it's not been great. But what you planned for evil, what was hard in our lives together and separately, God planned for good.
mm-hmm.
And again, I think we come back here, and Joseph reminds us that God's goodness is on display. And when we look back, that's what we should see. We should see, um, there's that phrase, right? Hindsight's 2020. And so when we
Mm-hmm.
look back, we can oftentimes better see what God has been doing, even if we don't recognize it in the moment. We have the benefit in our day, because we're looking at the whole story. Remember all these stories that we've talked about: Joseph at Potiphar's house, Joseph in the pit, Joseph in jail. He didn't know the end of the story. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
know where that was coming, and no doubt, I would kind of a little theological imagination here. When he was in those moments, he was trying to trust God. He had some questions, but he was trying to trust God. But when he got to the end of his life, he could look back and see that God was at work. Just like you were just saying, God has been at work all along the way. He's
Mm,
been brought to me. There's a design and purpose to what he's doing. There's a plan to this place. Did I like all the things? No, I didn't like all the things, but God used it for good. And I think we can use this story to help kids see, and preschoolers see, and our leaders see, we may not like right where we are, but right where we are is not the end of the story. So
Yeah.
we don't see the end of our own story.
Mm-hmm.
God's working, and we can trust His faithfulness in the past. We can look in the story that we see, the scriptures that we see. We can trust His faithfulness, and that will move us to have faithfulness and confidence in His faithfulness in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. So, Crystal, I have a question. Thinking about our kids or preschoolers who may say, I'm just a kid. I don't have anything to look back on. How can we help them understand what we're talking about when we say look back?
Yeah, I that's a great question, Rachel, because it's true. Like the three of us are sitting here, more in the middle age range. So of course we have countless stories that we can look back on it. And that's the same in Joseph's life at this point, right? Like it's been years and years. And so we've got kids that are 5 years old saying, what do I have to look back on? I can't even remember what happened last weekend. So there's two things that I think that are important to know. Number one is that we are teaching kids this idea of looking back and seeing and celebrating what God has done as a training tool for the future. And so we can let them know, like, yeah, you may not have a lot in your life right now, but when you are 16, you can look back and see what God did when you were in elementary school and when you were in preschool. And when you're 26, you can look back and see what God did when you were in high school. And so we're kind of preparing them for what is going to happen in the future. Because the thing is, like Jeremy just said, Joseph had this attitude of faith throughout his life, which is what helped him look back in that moment. We don't know what Joseph's response would have been if he was in a place of bitterness and discouragement and hadn't trusted God. But we know that he did throughout his life. And so he was able to look back and see those moments. And so we want preschoolers and kids to know that this is a helpful tool for the future. But even right now at their young age, while they might not be able to look back in their own lives and see God's faithfulness, they can look at these true stories in the Bible. This is where we will shout from the rooftops why it is so great for us to teach the Old Testament to
Hmm.
preschoolers and kids, because it is filled with stories of God working through the worst circumstances, that we can look at those and say, God was faithful to those people, so I can know that He will be faithful and good in my life as well. But it's also a great time for us as leaders to share our own stories of God's faithfulness in our lives as well, that preschoolers and kids can learn that we say it's not just people in the Bible, like, this is me sharing the story about adopting Noah. This is Jeremy sharing the story about stepping out in faith after school. And we get to say, I have seen this in my own life. And so
Hmm.
there is a lot for preschoolers and kids to glean from this idea of looking back, even when they're so young that they don't really have much to look back on.
Yeah, that's so true. And as we think about this idea of looking back, sometimes we feel like I am in a season of discouragement or pain or hurt, and
Mm.
I don't even know if I have the energy. I'm too weary to look back right now and to maybe make those connections. And so, what encouragement do you have to a leader who is weary in light of this Bible story?
One thing I would probably default to kind of what I was saying earlier, which is where you are today is not the end of the story.
Mm.
When we think about previous weeks, we talk about Joseph being in jail. He said, "Hey, don't forget me when you left." It took 2 years for that for the guy to remember him in jail. And if he had stopped right there in that moment while he's in jail in any of those 2 years and been discouraged, it's not the end of his story. And
Hmm.
so just that would be what I want to encourage leaders to say, is to think, don't diminish what they're going through, because some of our leaders are going through some really hard things. We all are carrying some kind of baggage when we
Hmm.
show up on Sunday mornings. And just a little bit of an aside here, that's kind of what we say about hi-fi in general, is that we don't know what people bring with them when they show up. We
Hmm.
don't know. That's one of those assumptions that we try not to focus on, of that everybody brings something. So we don't want to assume that when our leaders show up, they're having a great day and they're ready to teach. maybe they're having a great day. We hope they're ready to teach, prepared, but they may have had a really hard morning getting out of the house. They may have got some
Mm-hmm.
really bad news the night before or the day, a couple of days before. And so, um, pray over them, pray for them, encourage them in that God is still working.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll again go back to what Crystal said a second ago. Take them to the scriptures. We see God's faithfulness in our own life. We see God's faithfulness throughout the scriptures, in the life of Joseph, in the life of Job. My pastor's preaching through Job last week, and so like take them to some of these places. The life of
Mm-hmm.
Peter, that God's faithfulness, we can trust in His faithfulness because He is a good God who has a good plan, and we don't have to see the end. We don't have to know the end.
Mm-hmm.
We're called to be faithful and trust right where we are, and
Yeah.
so hopefully they can find some encouragement in God's faithfulness and His trustworthiness,
Mm-hmm.
even in the midst of hard situations. What would you add to that, Crystal?
Yeah, I've been doing next gen ministry since I was just out of, I guess, next gen. Like I started when I was 19. And for a couple of years, I actually had this Bible that when I was leading, I did a lot of high school ministry. And so when I was leading a small group of girls, oftentimes I would lead them for a couple of years even. I would write their names in the back of this Bible. And I still have that Bible on my shelf. And it's amazing to look back in that and see what God has done in the lives of many of those girls. Are they all loving and following Jesus today? Definitely not. But there are so many of them who are faithfully devoted to the Lord today. They are married with kids, or they are working in full-time ministry. It's awesome. And so I would encourage leaders who are feeling weary, who might be feeling burnt out, or maybe, can we even be honest? You The ministry year just started and you have a new group of kids that you're working with, and you're like, I just miss my old
Hmm.
kids so much. I love the idea of just journaling and keeping a track of those names, that you can look back and you can say, I see what God did. I see what God did through those hard years, through those hard conversations. I see what God did when I was feeling discouraged. And it can be a great reminder. There's one girl that I think of in particular that when I was leading her, it was not easy. She had a lot of things. She had a lot of issues. And when I'm feeling discouraged in ministry, right now, I just pull up her Instagram and I look and see what she's doing, because that girl is running hard after Jesus right now. And so it can be so good to remember what God has done in the lives of the kids that we have worked with, through the time and the prayers that we have given. That can give us that boost of encouragement that we need right now to help us keep going, when things are hard. Because, like Jeremy said, the hard seasons are not the end of the story, which is just, it's really good to be reminded of those practical examples where God has worked in a great way.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. Thank you both. So what we have coming up for next week is we have Hooray Day and Game Changer. So we're so
Yay!
excited to celebrate how God's at work and to celebrate His plan for us. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for using Hi-Fi. Thanks for building real connection and true belonging in the ministries you lead. So until next time, know we're praying for you and cheering you on.